This is episode 4 of my little journey on my comeback tour. And let's just start off with the good news and the bad news. Start off with the bad news first. It's pretty bad. Last week I was saying my hip was killing me, and I woke up Monday morning just with my knee destroyed. No idea. No idea. I guess this is what getting old is all about. So when you look at my little fitness goals, it is not happening at all. And my knee is just broken. It's kind of put my tournament that I was going to play this weekend, it's put it in jeopardy. If I can't, if I'm just in so much pain, I don't want to do it. Plus, it's just like, even like running to the bathroom while playing the game, it does not seem like a fun thought to me. So I don't know what's wrong with my knee, but I got a problem right there. The good news is I've been studying chess. I've been working really hard, and honestly, if I didn't have chess, the bummer of the knee would be so tremendous that I just would have started drinking. In all seriousness, I don't say that as a joke. In fact, a lot of times I think in my life, I would have just fallen apart if I didn't have some kind of line to hold with chess. Something like, because if you start drinking and stuff, you start doing terrible things to your body, your mind starts going, and then it's not just that you don't, win the tournament or whatever, but you don't feel that lucidity that is not just about chess, but in other parts of your life. And interesting thing that Kasparov said that I think really rang true to me is that chess players kind of like to think. You know, that's what they're all about is thinking. And so it's not just chess, but in other areas of their life, they're also interested in thinking. Anyways, so this tournament, February 21st to 23rd, is going to be going on, and hopefully I'll make it. A thing I wanted to put out there that is really interesting for everybody. So I'm going to be last basically 2 3 weeks in March and beginning of April. I'm going to be in St. Louis, and only just yesterday that I put two and two together. That is also the same time that the World Championship candidate match is going to happen. So as a chess fan, this is just a huge time for me. It's a great time to be in St. Louis. I think they're going to be doing their commentary in like the middle of the night because it's being played in Russia. But it's still a cool time. If you want to come to the club to visit, really beautiful time. There's going to be a lot of people there hanging around the club. I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be covering a different tournament, which is the Spring Classic. There'll be a lot of strong GMs there. And it's just to be a beautiful time to hang out and watch people play, watch them analyze after the game. So that's part of really my training regimen. I realize, I'm going to go there and be watching the Spring Classic, watching the candidates tournament, and it's obviously a much higher level than I'm playing at, but of course, soaking it in. And I find really helpful is just watching really strong players analyze, and sometimes I allow myself a question or two, but basically I'm just watching them, and I get to interview them after the game as well. So that's for anybody, by the way. You can come to St. Louis and hang out. You don't need to have any reason to be there. You just come and hang out at the club. So that's just on my agenda. I wanted to put that out there. And let's move to what I actually did. It was a good week. As you know, the basis of what I feel chess improvement is all about is analyzing your games. And I did 20 pages of writing in my journal here. And, just to give you an example, kind of looks like that. Three and a half, the 3.5 there is just 3.5 games. So 20 pages, I did 3.5 games. A lot of work, and it's really great. Honestly, having this show helps me keep the line, I feel. A lot of times when I hold the line is just me staying honest with the study program, because I really enjoy the analysis, but the very beginning, the very first 5 minutes, it's really hard for me to do it, and so that's kind of it's a difficult thing for me to do to just get started. And back in the day when I was trying to become a GM, I did this Nazi thing where I didn't allow myself to play the next tournament until all the games were done. I'm not making it this time. I got 7.5 games left. I'll be lucky if I clear off a game and a half, you know. But I'm gonna have some time after if I play this next weekend. I'll have some time in between that and then St. Louis to knock them out, hopefully. But I'm not. I've decided I'm not going to be in a rush about it. I just want to be consistent about reviewing them. But it's definitely better to do them as soon as possible. You know, after you play, just so you have it in your mind. By the way, I'm going to do the end of the month show next week. So on chess.com, you can submit your games to me. There's a thread there. If you just Google my name with chess.com and the member analysis review, you will find that. You can put your game in. The only requirement is you spend some time doing annotations because that's really what I'm trying to encourage people to do. That'll be a 3-hour show. That's going to be on Tuesday. Normally I do it on Wednesday, but I had a scheduling conflict. So I'm going to be Tuesday, 3-hour show. And really, honestly, even for me, you know, I wrote on this list that teaching is part of my training. And for sure, you know, I feel like whether you're 1,200 or 2,000 or somewhere in between, as long as I feel like someone's trying to improve, I can usually get something out of it just by trying to explain, you know, WTF is going on in a given position. I haven't been playing Blitz, and I think that's really good. I'm going to talk maybe a little bit about that later, what that means philosophically to me. Now, let me show let me show you some of my problems. So I've been doing these problems from this big book that I don't recommend because it's a great book, but it's too hard to get. And if you get it online, it's just like it costs a gazillion dollars. There are other endgame problem books like it. Let me show you the issue I'm running into right now. I've had this issue before because I've done the book more than once. So we go over here. This is kind of a typical problem that you get at towards the end of the book when things are getting a little bit freaky. And the question just is like, well, how useful is it to do the really freaky problems? And this one actually I think is very instructive, which is why I just chose it as an example. Some of them are very, even, you know, far more bizarre than this. This problem is white to play and draw. And it's instructive. That's why I chose to show it to you. But I want to stress that there's some really weird problems out there. And what I've decided though is that I'm going to push through. And the thing is, you know, you hit weird problems, they're going to take longer, and they're going to be more frustrating. And so I just have to reorient myself. You know, before I was beginning the day doing like 9 to 18 problems, which is 2 pages in this book, and now I'm just going to dial it back down to like 3, and you know, they can be pretty tough. This one takes a little doing. Let me just show you the answer just because it's kind of fun, and what the let's call it what the knowledge is that's to be gained here is knight e5. We're threatening to sacrifice the knight, so the guy's got to move the pawn. Again, we're sacrificing the knight if he doesn't move. So rook d1 is the only move. Knight takes, and you got a queen, obviously. Oh, sometimes, you know, chess.com needs to fix this. This is very hard for me sometimes to grab the pawns. Let's turn that into a queen. And the beauty of this problem is that, first of all, the two knights are the only combination of minors where where they can hold against the queen, and that's really because they can protect each other. But even here, you got to be careful. If knight e3, what you can do is you queen f7, and you're going to run the king into a zugzwang position, make him move a knight, and then one of the knights are going to fall off. So the cool answer here is now king e7. And we will be able to achieve knight e3. There's obviously now the trick is you can't take either knight because of this fork. And if something like this, the beauty is this knight is controlling some backward squares so that you can't really run my king out of dodge. Like, you know, you go here, I can go here, and yeah, that's very difficult. There's no, no way to really get at me here. Like queen e5 would be the move to squeeze me, but there's no way to squeeze me. And of course, the black king is stuck in this little box over here. So that was an interesting thing, and I feel like in terms of problems, this is a new challenge for me. Like I said, I've done the book several times. I've always stopped. Somewhere where it got freaky, I always stopped and I allowed myself the rationalization of like, buddy, this is too hard. Just stop the pain. Just stop the pain, and go do something else. But I'm going to force myself to do it here. Okay. Um, got a question. At which rating did you start playing d4 in closed positions? It's it. Another guy says, I get this end game in like half of my games. Another funny thing actually in the book is there are a lot of problems are this mate of two knights with black having a pawn. And I did learn to do that. It is, you learn interesting things, and that has never come up in any of my games. Um, but I think the technique is kind of interesting, and maybe at a different point I'll show that. Ali, I I started playing. I'm from the pre-internet age, and I played E4 for a long time, and I kind of wish I had played it longer uh, because I didn't understand positional chess, and I didn't have a coach. So it would have been better for me to just keep things tactical, I think, for as long as possible. But I started maybe around, I don't know, 1900. I started playing D4. Uh, did it matter too much? I would say my biggest problem, even as a kid, was like I put too much stock in the openings. It would have been great if someone had given me this book and told me this was this was the path to chess mastery. Okay, um, let me share a moment, a terrible moment for me that I talked about in a previous video, but I just wanted to share it because, in Star Wars, the thing is you gotta go deep and ask yourself what's going on in your life. Search yourself, Luke. And this, I did some self-searching in this position. And let me just briefly recap if you don't remember this terrible thing. I'm playing this kid. I knew I had a one position, and with using less than a minute, I blundered completely with bishop f1, and it really hurt my tournament because the guy found this kind of simple tactic, and all of a sudden I'm the one who's completely lost. Anyways, the reason I wanted to just share this with you, by the way, I'm just going to share some of the analysis I did and the key moments, if you will. So after this game, I constructed this narrative that this was a senior moment, right? Now, this senior moment thing is really in my head, and Alex Yermolinsky is the guy who kind of like put it there with the idea that we're all like blundering all the time now as older people. And cognitive decline is for real. It's a very real thing. But this particular position, I think it's BS to call cognitive decline. Like, yes, I missed something, but this mistake is really a lot far more psychological. Like if we back up just a couple moves, I have a nice position, and I knew that this attack wasn't going to work. And the kid comes at me like a spider monkey. I'm just improving my stuff. And I know it's bad what he's doing. And he's moving kind of quickly and arrogantly. And what do? I like start moving fast myself. And so the key thing I took away from this is, and this applied too when I was trying for GM and finally made it, is I need to develop like a conscientiousness and sense of responsibility for each move that I do, right? So here, for example, I played f4, and I knew it was winning, like let's say intuitively, or you could say in my heart, or whatever you want to say, but I didn't calculate it all the way to the end. And of course, that's what I should be doing. So I knew this was winning. He played Queen f2, and then I didn't think about it. I didn't just like and it's so embarrassing to move in less than a minute. But it's kind of like this feeling of like, okay, kid, get off the board and let me move on to my next round. The game is over. And right, and like I've said on the show before, my biggest problem, and one of the reasons I even started doing this show is I realized I have a problem with beating this 2200s. I have to beat the 2200s. Same thing will definitely be true this weekend. I'll have to play a couple 2200s, and I won't be able to get to play anyone interesting unless I knock them down. And you've got to beat the 2200s roughly 9 out of 10 times, just for me anyways, just to hold my rating. So, right, that's just a real problem. Okay, moving on from the so called senior moment, I thought I'd share a couple moments from the analysis that I thought were really instructive. Um, so, I was playing in this game a young woman named Martha Samadashvili, and uh, I had I had done commentary for the U.S. girls, uh, yeah, the U.S. girls last year, and so I was able to watch her a little bit. And so here I was playing her in this recent tournament in Philly. And right away, we got this position I knew nothing about. I knew absolutely nothing. So, anyways, I did this. There were other things I could do. Like the computer wants me to play Queen B6 here, but okay. So, we got this fascinating endgame. King E7. And now she took and played Rook C1. So, it's a funny thing where I had no idea what I was doing, but I was pretty certain that this position existed just because a bunch of logical moves for the most part have been played. And indeed, like there was several, not a whole lot, but many strong GM games that went like this. And Rook C1, I totally expected. I thought that was the most natural move. Castles long might have been better. And turns out it's with the computer one. I think Short played it. And the beauty of this is by keeping your rook on the d file, you make any kind of e5 more difficult. But that's deep. That's really deep. Okay. Rook c1 takes. And this was the first moment I just wanted to talk a little bit about. And before get into variations, let's just say some obvious things. With my students, something I really stress is to, when you get a position and you're just trying to find your bearings, don't begin with a bunch of variations. Just first take a couple minutes to try to articulate a narrative of the position. And so here, for example, I'm pretty sure I played King D6 quickly. And it's not a bad move. And in fact, Korchnoi played the same move in 1957, so it's kind of fun. But the thing about this position, let's just put it in words, is that I have a strong center, and the value particularly is that this pawn on f6 is dominating this knight on f3, and this pawn is weak. As compensation, what white has is that my pieces are in a scrumble. If that's a real word, they're in a scrumble over here, and I need to unscrumble them. So, also though, in this interesting way, the bishop on f1 isn't doing all that much, and what we're going to see is on King d6, she plays bishop b5, and now the bishop at least is going to be annoying. So an interesting move that no one has played in this position. This position hasn't been actually achieved too many times, but still, this is one where I did the whole post analysis, I wrote it all out. I did not think of this move, so it's an example of where the computer found, I think, a really nice move, and that's a6. Now, like I said, I don't analyze with the computer until the very end when I input the game for the file. And then I turn it on in a couple of positions where I kind of want to see what it's thinking. And I really like A6. And what we're going to see in this position is that there's going to be a couple moments where black is going to have the opportunity to do some real positional moves. And you're only going to get the understand them if you kind of go deep into what the narrative of the position is, right? And Black's dream, and I get this in the game, but I think White could have prevented it, is to dominate the center, and by dominating the center, take away squares from her pieces, especially the knight. So what a6, what you can see is like we kind of got a wall of white pawns that are making the bishop's life on f1 pretty difficult. For example, let's say bishop d3. Hard to imagine a different move, right? King d6, and you ask yourself, well, what is the value of this bishop, right? And not easy. Not easy to say what the bishop's value is. And I'm going to unscrumble like this, and very soon e5. In fact, probably just e5 before knight b6. So I thought that was an interesting opportunity. All right, king d6. Good move. And here's another interesting thing. By the way, you might ask yourself this very important question. What do you think the evaluation of the position is? It's a really important one. I feel like people don't ask, at least I don't hear them talking about it that much, especially nowadays when the young players are all about variations, variation this, variation that. Well, if you don't have at least for me, if I don't have a sense of like, okay, I think black is better or I think it's equal, when I start doing variations, I don't have a way of calibrating whether it's what I want, right? So one thing that's already interesting is I felt, just because I didn't seem like White had made any mistakes, I felt that it was equal, and then I was a little nervous, right? I'm just nervous about my business falling apart here. The computer, though, the heartless jerk that he is, he's just like, no, you're doing great. Because, well, especially the knight on f3, and then also you've got this e5 move coming. So, one thing I want to stress about this position that has everything to do with what I think is good positional chess is what I sensed in this position right away, and I didn't really have a great solution for it at the time, was that this knight is a really weird piece. First of all, it is kind of doing important stuff on d7. All these three squares have some amount of value for me, so it's not totally clear I even want to move the thing. Also, there's an interesting issue where if I play knight b6, which is the natural move, and this is what I do in the game, the knight is in danger of becoming dominated by b3, right? And then he's going to have to, it's very hard to see where the knight's going to go after that. So that already was a problem that I faced over here. So I played e5, and the interesting thing about e5 is that was the move that Korchnoi played against Bannock in the Soviet Championship 1957. Of course, I had no idea that he had played that in 1957, but that was the move. That's the human move, let's call it, with that. By the way, here is a kind of senior thing here I'll show. I looked in the database, and I had a game in this position, and John Fedorowicz played EF against me, which is maybe, EF here, and we got this position. 94 is probably a good move. And we got this position where it's probably equal. I'm going to win a pawn after like g3, queen e5, but my bishop is funny. Anyway, so that was like 2000. I had no idea. Maybe it's funny actually. One interesting thing about it is that not only is it embarrassing, I don't remember my own games, but my intuition, whether it was in 2000 or now, basically 20 years later, not basically 20 years later, that I played the exact same sequence. Also hilarious to think that my young opponent here wasn't even born. She wasn't even born in 2000. Okay, so snip, snip, king d6, bishop b5. Now, if I had been aware, I might have been willing to do this move, knight b8. And the point is simple, that if I go to b6, the knight isn't great. And now I'm going to kick the bishop and say, you cannot move my knight on c6. And of course, this is also nice because my bishop is hitting this. And of course, both of these moves, knight db8 and a6, they're hard to find and anti-intuitive because what black feels in his heart is that, oh, I'm undeveloped, right? And I need to do something. I need to get out of that mess. But the weird thing we're going to see is my own pieces are going to be in their own little bit of grief. Okay, so e5 was played, and I knew, or I felt I knew, what the key move here was. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch it so you guys can see some of my analysis here. Right, I felt like I knew what the key moves were here. Let me get rid of this. So I thought knight h5 was the trickiest, and interestingly, that's what happened in the Korchnoi game. So rook f8. This is how the Korchnoi game went. f5 with let's call it counterplay for both sides, and you know what's unsatisfying for black is he's putting his pawns on light squares, and that's of course the square of his bishop. And white is going to dance all around. The better player is going to win the game, you'd think, but in any case, it did turn out to be a draw in that game. So, okay, 92. And one thing I found interesting about this mistake wasn't totally clear to me it was a mistake at the time. It did feel wrong, was that it's a passive move, right? And really, let's say up to this point where at move 17, I don't feel like she's made any mistakes. And 92 is passive, and I don't like it because it blocks the rook and because the pawn is dominating the knight. Now, however, during the game, it still wasn't clear to me that I was better. I thought maybe a little bit better, but still a mess. Mostly because my scrumble, right? My scrumble is still going on. And the move I ended up playing, I was critical of in the post-game analysis, that is with my notebook, because eventually she's going to play b3 and my knight's going to become dominated. But that's in fact what the computer likes, right? And here's a funny thing, a variation. Maybe I saw some part of this, but I kind of doubt it. Is that this would have been the ambitious plan here, and I'm sure I was looking at both knight h4 and knight g3. And the fun bit about this, here's the first question: is like that if knight f5, I get to throw that in. I'm tagging the knight, so I live. And if here, then there's no hit on f5. So it feels like, oh, this is what I should have done. Now, this is an example, though, of where when you're down in development, you have this scramble that things can go wrong. So obviously, black is aiming with c5 to completely take over the game. The computer finds this amazing variation. Check this out. Knight g3, c5, knight h4. Who knew? Who knew? Check, 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 and my bishop's lost. It's a really nice variation, highlighting my scrumble and the fact that, you know, when you're playing the French, you better watch your bishop there on c8. So, yeah, of course I didn't see any of that. Though I might have, arguably I sensed something, because it does feel hard to play a6 just like it did earlier when it was in fact a reasonable move. Don't you have to move the knight so you can activate your bishop? That's totally how I felt. That's totally how I felt. But like I said, you see in that variation with c5, the knight on d7 was in fact doing something on d7. All right, now she makes definitely a mistake here with de, and the reason I think is pretty simple, put it in terms of words, is that the value of her knight on e2 is that, at least it felt to me like she was trying to make a dark square blockade. And so, for example, if I ever push e4, that she gets the dark squares. By taking, she gives me the center, and now some terrible things are potentially happening with her knights becoming dominated. And so, knight e2 and de, they don't look terrible, but those are the kind of mistakes, I think, where if I'm going to beat the 2200s all the time, I have to be, especially with black, I have to be very aware to and take advantage of them. Like with anybody making mistakes, they often come in pairs. And so, 92 and DE come in pairs because a person isn't going to come back to their senses until the position has gone wrong, right? So, you lose the thread of like how to think about a position. That's at least my theory on why mistakes come in pairs. But she has at least an idea here with knight h4. And she wants to play f4 next and get some dark square control and to make my pawns move, which definitely she should. The drama, of course, is when she plays f4 and I play e4. Well, I got some strong center pawns there, right? Okay, so I played a6, snip, snip, and now she dominates my knight. And so, obviously, I've got these beautiful center pawns, and it's now really going to be a question of how bad is my knight on b6, and how bad are her knights. Really all about domination. And also, obviously, I need to get my bishop on c8 active in some way. All right. In the post game, I kind of felt I should have played c5, but okay, I'm going to pass that deliberation over. I played rook f8, and she correctly plays f4. Good move. Anything else would have been passive, and I think it would now be a mistake for me to take that pawn because she'll take it back, and I've lost a lot of the juice of my center pawns there. Okay, so here we go, e4. By the way, if you can see the notes on the side there, those are the notes I put in, usually a lot less than I do in the notebook, just to put in the basics of what I found and what the computer maybe told me I was wrong. You can see there the times there, that's, what we got left. We're about to see, you can see actually coming, I tank really good. So h3, I thought that was a good move, but it turns out she played it with the wrong intention. I thought her intention was to play g4 and try to get counterplay with maybe knight g3 after that. Probably you have to play rook f1 first, but in any case, her intention was actually to put the rook over here, which was incorrect, and we'll see that. So this was a really interesting moment. I've noticed this in several of the games where I have endgames, is that I have some moment where I tank, and I absolutely tanked here for 29 minutes. There's a game I was looking at today where I tanked for 31 minutes. And it's true that I need to, I need to come up with some good moves here. Let me show you first on my mind just kept spinning around on again and again. I remember I came back to this variation several times. Was c5. Again, I thought she was going to play g4. And I want, of course, I want to play d4. Not just to have those beautiful pawns, but also so that the bishop can be can get some scope. And of course, if I'm going to move a pawn, it should be e3, right? Just so the bishop has even more scope. And I kept seeing that she had b4. And I must have looked at this for 5 minutes because, this is clearly the variation that I want. And I didn't find the correct move in my notes either. I looked for a little bit at this variation, and then there's all this counterplay now. I don't want any part of that. And the thing the computer found, I don't know why why I didn't find it. It's very simple. You let her have a pawn, and that pawn's going to die anyway. And the king, what a great king. What a great journey, too. Where now, the white king is really in trouble, and things like knight c5 are coming, and there's not any clear counterplay at all for white in this position. And this guy, of course, needs a job. So that would have. Let me just say, I mean, what I did is, funnily enough, like what the computer thinks is the best move. I played bishop d7. I wasn't thrilled about this, though. I felt like white was right on the edge because if I give her a little bit of time, she's going to play g4, rook f1, knight g3, and get her own drama started with some kind of knight f5. So I was not happy that c5 d4 didn't work. The computer, it's weird because the computer's just like, yeah, you're winning all the time, or you're clearly better. So it's a really bizarre situation here. Let me just show a little bit more of the game. I played bishop. By the way, my suggestion in my post game, the computer also liked, which was just a5 to stop b4 from happening. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Actually, I'll show a nice variation. I thought, of course, that was her intention, and I was looking at things like d4 and knight g3, but this is just full on domination here. And one variation I like is a4, knight f5, takes, takes, and takes. Honestly, not necessary, but this is the kind of thing that I thought was what the position wanted in here. I want to get the rook active, and I am going to start going after the king. And I had variations like this going on in my head also when I played bishop d7. Well, okay, I don't want to spend too long in this game, but here's the rook hd1 didn't make any sense, like I said. Now I get to do this. And now, basically, with rook c8, I have taken b4 off the table. And she blunders here with knight g3, but honestly, I think it's already toast. I don't, because if I get d4 in, that's really, really bad news. And, d4, b4, then I can do things like king d5. She's not taking on c5. So this was, well, now it's totally over, but yeah, difficult situation. King e3, I think I can play d4 check, for example. Biscuit Fiend. That's a nice name. This game was played over MLK weekend, so it's the tournament before last. And like I said, I'm working through the games. And what I'm doing today is just sharing some of the analysis of some of the interesting moments that I covered in the last week, because that's what I'm doing. I'm just sharing the progress I'm hopefully making. And so I did 20 pages of analysis in this, MLK weekend. Very up and coming player. She's probably going to play in the U.S. women's in addition to the U.S. girls. So that's just a beautiful opportunity. And hopefully I can do more commentary there in St. Louis. Actually, let's do another game with a top women's player. This is against Sabina Feuser. I think this was also, the MLK weekend. No, this was before. This was Thanksgiving. But I had looked at this recently. I'm falling behind. You can see I'm going over these games. I spend so much energy. Anyways, she won the U.S. women's a while back, and I just wanted to share a couple moments that I thought was interesting with the analysis. So first of all, when we think about this position, uh, it, 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 it's a provocative thing that she's done by playing both G6 and A6. Usually A6, we call that the Chebanenko, and the G6 system without A6, you'd call the Schlechter. And so I don't know what this is. I called it the Schlechtenenko. But like a lot of these things, strong players have played them, and I think this next move sets White on a path of the nature. White gets to now determine the nature of the game, and something I've talked about before. It's really interesting is this Gelfand book. He did these two books, and I think there's going to be a third one coming out at some point, which really turned me on to how to think about space. And so the plan that I choose in this game has everything to do with space. I played H3 and C5, right? Now we are definitely talking about space. But in a curious way, even though I think at least H3 is a fine move. The move, if I could do it again, the move that more fits my style is just Bishop D2, where I remain flexible and I develop. I'm a tempo fiend. I'm a tempo fiend, and when you're a tempo fiend, honestly, usually you will choose development over space, right? So yeah, really interesting thing about self knowledge, really. And I feel like this game goes in all kinds of weird ways, and I get in a little trouble in this game. And I think it has to do with me not knowing how to play with space. And I think space is one of the hardest things to learn how to do. A lecture I did at the St. Louis Chess Club last time I was there, you can find on YouTube, I really like. It was talking about how Fischer didn't play well with space. And that was a real eye opener for me because I usually think of Fischer as a universal player. Okay, but here it goes. H3, she plays B5. And this has occurred in several top GM games, even though, of course, I didn't know that at the time. And the move that's probably better and most simple is B3, mostly because it's still hard for her to figure out where this bishop on C8 is going to go. And that, of course, is the advantage of H3. Cool, Micro. I'm glad you were into the space advantage. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting lecture for me because it well, I grew up on Fisher, so thinking about him in a new light was interesting. By the way, my friend John Donaldson, who used to be the head of the Mechanics Institute, I am John Donaldson. He is also, I think he's still the captain of the U.S. men's team. Anyway, he's doing a huge book on Fisher. He's been working on it so long that he's gone blue in the face, and I think one of the reasons he had to stop working at the mechanics just so he could finish this book. He's done a lot of research. He sent me a really long email about Fisher, about that lecture. Just a lot of interesting feedback. So we could, if you're a Fisher fan, you could look forward to that book. I'm a little afraid of it, honestly. It seems like it's going to be so dense and thick of a book. I mean, those kind of books scare me a little bit. I don't know. We're just going to hope it's user friendly. Okay, so I played C5, again, inspired by this space business. And now, you know, my next move is strange. But in fact, it was also played by some strong players. Radjabov, in fact, played this move. So you're preparing B4 so that if A5, you can just meet it by moving a piece. And you're stopping black from playing B4 so that you can play E4 yourself. Okay, it's a little pretty highfalutin already for me. Queen C7. I played B4. She played E5, and let's call this my critical decision, where I make a mistake. And this, I think, is interesting for me to think about my own playing style and you know some of the problems that I have. where, playing with space is simply a difficult operation. It's a difficult thing to do well because you have to control your opponent from basically getting out. So let's talk about Black's grief just in terms of to put a more clear picture on what we're talking about, right? This pawn is dominating this knight. That knight is blocking the bishop. These knights, f6 and d7, are hitting each other, and this bishop needs this knight to move out of the way, right? That's like the basic fundamental grief that Black is dealing with. And I make just a bad move here, and I play bishop e2, and she very correctly plays knight e4, and it's like, oh no. Oh no, cry. Did you miss it, or did you like not understand it was coming? Now you're a little bit worse. Now I'm a little, because she has some nice tension with e5, but more importantly, now the disadvantages of her position are able to relieve themselves just with this one trade that she's able to get with knight e4. So the move I think I should have played, and by the way here, it's kind of funny, the computer has a little bit of trouble figuring out what to do, but let me first show what the computer likes and what Matlikov played in this position. The guy took, or actually he had it as black against some 2300. Takes something like this, and then queen g5, and it's an unclear position. But the move that I found in the postgame I really like and would have been dangerous, especially on a practical level. Obviously, I have to deal with the threat of e4, right? And knight d2 I really like because there's a, let's call it a deep, dark threat where Black is going to need to play on the king side, right? Probably, well, she has a choice whether she wants a structure with e4 or ed. But in either case, what's going to happen is my knight's going to cruise around here, and let me just put a variation on it here. So a5, a4. This could be a concern if you're worried about knight b3. And then I think this sacrifice is very interesting. Very interesting indeed. So we get this, and the pawn on a4 is also going to fall. Yeah, fascinating. And this sacrifice happens a lot, actually. There was a couple of games where it happened in the Gelfand book. So, right, if I had been a little bit clearer about this space business, this would have been a great thing to do. Notice it's a very long-term sacrifice that we're doing. And the dream is not simply that we're going to make a queen with the passed pawns, but that those pawns will control via space the black pieces. A really fascinating thing. By the way, you get this similar sacrifice sometimes. Imagine like there's a white pawn here and a black pawn here and a King's Indian structure with the King's Indian crush going down here, and there's a pawn on g4. Spank that pawn on g4. Take that thing. Take that thing. And it's similar to this, except, in the King's Indian, the king is often here. But the sack on g4, anyways, oftentimes even happens in the endgame. Anyways, that was just in the back of my mind when I was thinking about this variation. Now, of course, after knight d2, she's got a variety of things to do. But the general idea for me is if I get the knight here and even here, well, I'm thinking of sacking on c6 even, right? Same idea. I want to roll it up over there on the queen side. Okay, let me just, things go bad for me here. I'm worse. She plays, I think, well. Maybe I'll talk about this decision here. I think she should by all means take with the rook. And she took with the bishop. Earlier I was talking about evaluating a position as being really important, just to having a sense of, what you should do. Somewhere around here, I thought for sure, even after bishop takes, that I was a little bit worse, and I think that's still correct. But somewhere around here, she'd convinced herself that she was doing poorly, and that creates this mindset, I think, for her to go passive in the next couple moves. Okay. Um, yeah, John is a good author. Is your bishop ever going to get out? Good question. We're about to see, actually. So I played f4. She took. And now it's interesting because I thought I was worse. I was willing to go into, let's call it a deep tangle. And so let's just describe what I'm doing here. I'm like, well, I'm gonna circle the wagons and I'm gonna get the bishop out, right? Because yeah, I'm very sensitive to my poor bishop over there. The computer was just like, no, bro, just play knight f3, and if she attacks your pawn, just defend it, and you can do that if she goes in with knight f6, with like, let's call it, the computer thought it was like an unclear position. Yeah, her bishop's never going to get out. That's absolutely right. That's why I thought bishop a8 was a much better move. Anyways, let me just show you one final moment that I thought was interesting here. She played this move, and I was like, what are you doing? Because I felt like I was worse, and I I said, okay, I'll get rid of your beautiful knight. She took this way, and I was like, did you miss Queen G4? But like I said, the whole thing was early. At some point earlier, she had convinced herself that she was worse, and then she told herself that this position was holdable. And both during the game and after, I was just like, no, no, I don't think this position is holdable. I think this is absolutely terrible. So, and I think that's correct. It was, yeah, this is very dangerous. Now our queen has to hustle back. And now the next move I make is a small mistake. But let's just let it pass and look at this position here, bishop c8, because the idea was correct. What I'm going to file this mistake under is oftentimes I get lazy and I try to avoid complications. And this is certainly a great example of where I thought I could just take my time. I could take my time and I would get the same positional advantage that I was seeking, which was to play bishop e5 and exchange the dark square bishop. I simply told myself, and it's mostly true, that if I exchange that bishop, that I will be much better because the knight will then just dance all around the dark squares. And that's absolutely true. And so what I should have done here is I should have played bishop e5. And I'll just share with you some of the why it freaked me out. I said to myself, well, isn't she going to double the pawns? And aren't I worried about queen e7? And in hindsight, this is just absolutely wrong. Check, knight d2, and I saw this position. And obviously if my knight gets to d4, it's just the end of the world. And so I was worried about this move g5. And I felt to myself like, oh, if she wins the e-pawn with her king, my game is just going to be, then I have to worry or something like that. But this is not this is definitely the position where something in my mind should have said, I'm not worried about this. I'm not worried about this because I can achieve the blockade. And once I get the blockade, it's really all over. So, for example, takes, knight b3, knight d4. Now, by the way, king f2, also completely winning. But this is just toast. Now, I should say that one of the nice things is if you saw this in your mind's eye, maybe you could be worried about, like saying to yourself, oh, I win the c pawn, but somehow she's going to push the pawns, in which case, right, you just have the easy out here where, my God, how can you not be winning this thing? This is, by the way, this is when you play the French, this is what you, these are what your nightmares are made of. You're about to, like, trap the king into a little box by knight d4, and if she goes, then obviously knight d4 is the end of the world. There's no There's no push of those pawns. So actually, I'd say king f2, the much better move. Um, so I'll share the rest of the game, but this is the key thing I guess I want to say to myself, and maybe you guys can find it helpful too, is that these moments are going to come in pressure situations, and you have to let the position become violent. And like my sensei Smyslov says, every good positional push will culminate in a tactical finish. It's rare, very rare, in fact, especially if you're playing somebody over 2,000, that the game will just completely fall apart positionally. There will be some tactical thing like that which will come. So let me show you how she defended. She got her king out of dodge, and I calmly did all this stuff, and I said, great, now I got her. And she played a good move, bishop f8. And to me, it was just a real stunner because I was like, what? I said, what? You can allow me to do this? To have, generally you get that bishop there and you think the end of the world. But now my knight can't do all that much. I still thought maybe I was better here, but my knight truly isn't doing all that much, and I'd love to trade off that bishop. Bishop f4 trying to do it. Queen f6, very good move. And then she hits me with another good move. And then all of a sudden, life is as easy as I wanted it to be. This was another interesting move. Bishop e8, arguably an exclam. I thought she could have played maybe bishop h3 or so. That's too complicated. Let's just say bishop e8 was fine. Knight d6. And now this was real interesting because I would have taken on d6 in a heartbeat. I don't think that's too difficult of a pawn and a bit opposite color bishop endgame to defend. But she just says no, and says I don't have anything. So, anyways, we danced around here, and that was a draw there as well. So, this is a review of some of the games I played before I made my official comeback. I had a nice tournament a weekend before last, and hopefully, if my knee becomes better, I will be able to play this weekend. That's the goal. So, next week, however, Tuesday it's going to be from 3 to 6 Eastern, noon to 3 Pacific. I will be doing the member analysis. If you want to submit your game, you can. And that's if you just search my name at the thread of member analysis on chess.com, you'll find it. And also, if you want lessons, here's my little shingle I got with, you can contact me to do some lessons. Or, last week actually, I had a guy contact me to maybe go to a tournament, Dane Matson out in upper Minnesota, and so I added it there, June at Twin Ports. So I put that on my list. I don't know if I'll be able to make it, but it's always cool to be contacted for a tournament. My wife usually doesn't let me get away, but as you can see, I got some cool events coming up this year. So I have everything. I have all the tournaments set up to make improvement as long as I can do the improvement. All right. Paul in New Jersey, thank you very much, and I'll see you guys next week. We'll do the member analysis. Bye-bye.